The one world government is being formed right now. One world government. It is being formed. It's called the Great Reset. When we think of one world religion, most people are like, oh, one world religion. So the Muslims and the Christians are going to have to be melded into one. How is that going to? I don't think that's what it means by one world religion. I think we're seeing the first church now being dedicated to the new global religion. And it is social justice, environmental justice. It's all this gobbledygook that we all know is not just wrong, it is dangerous. That's the first church. The Cathedral of Notre Dame in France is the first church, the global church. Mark my words. Christians, Jews, Muslims who don't think that you should translate that exactly as written, we're all going to be fine with each other. We're all going to be fine. And we're all going to be able to live next to each other without trying to kill one another. This global church will bring darkness unlike you've ever seen.
Welcome back to another episode of The Awakened. We're going to do just a quick hitter here for you guys. We kind of want to break down the clip that we just played in the beginning. But before we get to that, just a quick reminder, make sure you guys are following us wherever you can. I mean, right now we're still out on Facebook and YouTube. Get over to Rumble, but make sure you're going to www.aga.network. All our stuff will always be there. We own that. We control that. They can't shut that down, which is important. Make sure you're texting into the text line. Pastor Rob, why don't you just throw that out there?
Yeah,
I can't remember
no problem.
The number.
So text AGA to 330-619-4497. That's AGA to 330-619-4497. It's going to ask you a few questions to become one of our insiders, and you'll be entered into a drawing where we're going to give away swag from the AGA network and maybe the Awakened.
Yeah,
that would be pretty cool.
That would be cool.
So yeah, that's how you get to be a part of the insiders. What does an insider mean? It means stuff that we aren't even able to bring to you on an episode. We're going to be sending to you, and you'll be able to hear what's happening. We'll even give you updates of where we may be going live for something, and you'll get that link as well. So join the insider group for the AGA network, and we'd love to see you on the other side of that wall.
Yep. So I'm Josh back with you again, joined by Rob. Nate's back at the table once again. And we also have a new guest. Pastor Sean Archer is off camera, but he is mic'd up. Pastor Sean, how's it going?
Good.
Good. So we just kind of want to talk about this one world order, this one world government, this one world religion. And it's interesting because in your most recent Sunday service,
yes,
on December 5th, you actually dove into this head on.
This is the way I see it. If we're not going to talk about it from the pulpit, people aren't going to talk about it at their dining room table, and we have to highlight what is going on. This Great Reset, as you heard Glenn at the beginning of the show talking about, is for real. It's happening now, and many people are asleep to it happening, and so that's a huge problem that we have to figure out, and we have to be, awakened to, really.
Yeah. And I like how he explains, okay, so this one world religion isn't like, okay, everybody's going to believe in Jesus, or everybody's going to believe in this religion or that religion. It's this ESG score, which you mentioned the other day. So that's your environmental, social justice, and governance score.
Yes.
This is a big thing. And I know if you haven't heard about this, or you have, but you're not sure what it means, we will do a full episode just breaking down ESG, how that's being, designed and implemented and everything else. But that's important to understand that is the religion he's talking about, this one world religion.
And it's for a more equitable globe. It's an equitable question.
Definition time. So difference between equality and equity. This is big. You got to understand this. So equality is everybody gets the equal opportunity. That's equality. So we all have the same opportunities. It's just what we decide to do with it. It's our freedom of choice, really, to partake in an opportunity or to not. Equity is everybody gets the same outcome, meaning it doesn't matter what you do. Your outcome is already predetermined, and it's going to be the same as the next person's. That's equity. Equality is you determine your outcome based on the opportunity that you take.
Right.
So they're complete opposites to each other. I think a lot of these mainstream media sources are throwing around equity as if it is equality. It's not the same thing. It's actually the exact opposite.
Yeah, the exact opposite. And for those that don't take the time to define it, it can be very confusing. And so he mentioned the Great Reset agenda, what they're doing already globally, what they're putting in place. And there's a component of the Great Reset that is very interesting. It says that it would ensure that investments advance shared goals such as equality and sustainability. Equality and sustainability. It's not about freedom. It's about whatever the leaders of this movement want. That's what you're going to get. And when he references a one world religion, a one world government, you can read about it in Scripture. We're not going too far off from Revelation, but it's coming to fruition before our eyes.
And it seemed like he was alluding to. That was the first time I watched that video, but it seemed like he was saying, keep your label, but believe this.
Exactly. You can be a Christian if you believe in the equality, if you believe in all of this stuff, you can remain a Christian and be in this religion.
So I would have to assume that's their selling point.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep your label.
Because we're all about labels, let's be honest.
Jeez. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that we're on this slippery slope of watching. It's all about being awakened. Come on, let's just be honest. If you're not awake, you can go down that slippery slope and say, I'm a Christian, but I have to believe this thing and I can be a part of the global church. Are you kidding me? People will say, sign me up for that ticket.
Isn't there something about many false Christs will rise in my name?
Yes,
something like
many, not just one.
Yep.
Very interesting.
And this whole woke agenda that everybody hears about, I don't know how many people follow everything that's going on, but you might just be hearing that term thrown around, woke. This is woke or that is woke culture, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's what this ESG stuff is. I mean, it's all tied in together. So the social justice part of that, well, you're not woke if you don't believe in white supremacy, right? I mean, everything's racist. Well, that's part of that social justice, and that's part of that ESG score.
Right. And so the one world religion is you can keep your Christianity if you believe in that.
Yep.
White supremacy is a bad deal, then you can say, I believe in that, so I can keep my label as a Christian, but I can go do that. I don't see anywhere in Scripture where that's a good plan. I'm just saying.
If you're not following Jesus, you're...
Right, yeah. If you're following your woke score, then I don't think you're following the right thing.
Yeah. There's just so much that goes into it, but it's important. I mean, then you say this too a lot, like, we have to call it what it is, and we have to call it out.
Yeah, we have to. It's very interesting. The quote that I read on Sunday morning about the Great Reset. This is a line out of it. It says, "One silver lining of the pandemic," it says pandemic, but it was a pandemic, "is that it has shown how quickly we can make radical changes to our lifestyles. So let's take advantage of it." I read this at the end of the last episode. Klaus Schwab said this: the pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. That's not just the governmental agencies of our world. That's the church, as you can see, as you heard Glenn talking about. They want to reset everything and create a one world religion, one world government. They want everything to be global. We read about that in Scripture and what that really entails, but we have to be awake to this and say, not on my watch.
Yeah. Pastor Sean, how much had you heard or understood about like the ESG scores and stuff like that before yesterday?
I did not, so it was very enlightening.
Is that the first time you'd heard of ESG?
Yeah, it is, yes.
Okay, see, that's...
Now, my son Nathaniel had referenced it when he talked a while back about China is implementing that same thing in China. So,
Yeah, but it's here. I heard the best explanation of it that made it really brought it to my level is that if you post something on a social media network that goes against the woke score, the ESG score, and they will not come to you directly as the person who posted it. They won't come to you directly and say, we're going to give you a $5,000 fine yet. But what they'll do with this ESG score is they'll go to Facebook or Twitter and they'll say, hey, you've got an abnormal amount of these negative things. So your score is actually horrible. And so we're not going to allow you to borrow money. We're not going to allow you to engage in commerce until you fix that score. Well, what are they going to do so they can keep their finances rolling and getting loans from Wells Fargo and all these other places that have just signed on to some crazy stuff, which will be another episode we do.
Yeah, so that's interesting because that is part of that private-public partnership where what you're talking about is exactly what's going on. So the government's not coming in and saying, well, you can't post this on Facebook. They're telling Facebook, if you don't censor what these people are saying, we're going to lower your ESG score.
Right. And then you lose access to everything as a company. They're going to limit because they're already in all the big banks. The banks are already signed up with this ESG stuff. And so the banks aren't going to be able to function, or regulatory problems are coming their way if they don't abide by these ESG scores. So they're trying to that, as you said, public-private partnership. They're using that in America because they know that if they came after just the regular people, that it's not going to work.
Right. And this was never the intention. The government was never supposed to be in bed with all these corporations.
No, in fact, all of our documents have been put in place that we hold the government accountable.
Right.
Which is why they haven't taught it in so long. But because the Constitution is to limit the government, not to limit the people.
Yep. Yeah. And that's why Facebook and YouTube just came out with those policies that we went through last week of the things you are not allowed to say about COVID and the COVID vaccines.
They're getting ahead of the curve.
Yeah. They know that that's the ESG. I mean, it's January 5th, and that's something that I want to look up. I'll make a note. Why January 5th is when those go into place? Why was it January 5th that you had to have everybody fully vaccinated or fired? Is that when a certain ESG score is going to go into effect? We got to look into that. It does make you wonder.
Makes you think hard about it. And the problem is that we often think really hard, but don't take action.
Yeah.
So that's why we're doing this show. We're doing this show so that you know what's happening and that you can take action.
Yeah. And like we said on the last one, the action is share it. Go talk about it. Have these discussions, these conversations with people, because it's great to tune into this type of information and try to learn what's going on and understand the truth. But if you're not then taking the truth and what you've learned and share it with somebody else, then that means that the information is dying with you. It's just stopping right there.
And go ahead.
Probably one of the most misunderstood topics in the church would be the end times. Would you agree?
I would agree. Every denomination has their own view. And within those views of denominations, each person has their own individual view of what is going to take place. Exactly.
And I don't think it's important that we agree on 100% on everything, but we see what is happening in the world, and maybe you don't want to go all in on it, but just be aware of it. That's all. That's all we're asking. Yeah. Just be aware of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that when you read their own words, when you read the Global Economic Forum, when you read the World Economic Forum, when you read that stuff in their own words, which is what I did on Sunday on the 5th, is just read the front page of the website of what they want, and it correlates pretty clearly with what the word says is the end of the world, really.
Yeah, and you did a really good job of explaining the difference between the world and the earth.
Yeah, big difference. The earth is dirt. The world is a ruling system, and you'd have to go back and listen to all of it. But we often confuse those terms, which means that the scriptures that we read don't actually mean what we thought they've meant all along. And if we really go into the definitions of what those words are, we can read the Bible with new understanding of what they really meant, not what we've been taught.
Yeah, right.
good things go from generation to generation, but stupid beliefs go from generation to generation just as fast. And I think we've all been taught some things that maybe we're taught from whether it's a doctrine standard or whether it's a personal preference in your family standard or how somebody understood the scriptures. We have to go in. I mean, we've been a consumer society in America for decades. But when you're building your belief system as a person, you can't consume it from someone else because it'll never hold up the test of time. You know, we've seen in all these different countries where Christians are kneeling on the beaches and being murdered for their faith. You won't stand that long if you've gotten all of your theology and all of your belief from someone else. It has to be your own deal. You don't get into heaven because your parents were saved or, you know, had a relationship with Jesus. You got to do it yourself. And I think that we're coming to a time when this is the most important time to figure out where you stand with the Lord and to figure out where you stand and what your beliefs are about what's coming. Because the line is clearly drawn and it's becoming clearer every single day, but it's clearly drawn on you're going to have to make a decision. And that decision, you know, I was talking with somebody yesterday about the stuff that I read about the World Economic Forum and all that. And I said, I don't want you to believe it just because I read it to you. I don't want you to believe it because you heard someone else talk about it or even on this show. I want you to read it because you went to the website and you read their own words. You've dissected what they're saying and you know the spirit behind it. That's why I want you to research it, because it's not just what I say or what we say on the show or anybody else. It's about what research have you done? And then once you've done it, do what we're doing and share it with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what we did going back to the last episode with Haley Hodgson from Australia. I mean, you can't just sit down and watch the interview with her and say, oh, wow, it's crazy. Like, we broke it apart. And, you know, I've listened to it a couple of times, and that's when I started to dissect it and say, okay, do I really believe what she's saying here? Well, and then if you just, like the interaction she had with the police guard at the facility, well, based on how he responded to her, I knew what she was saying was true.
Right.
Because he did not correct her or dispute her. He just said, well, it just is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the biggest thing. You may not believe this. I mean, you may not. It may not even come into your purview of thinking. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that for now. But sooner or later, you're going to have to come to a realization, because the scriptures say that all of creation will bow down and call him king. I mean, it's going to happen. Every single person on the planet is going to stand before the Lord. And I'm not saying that to impugn anybody. I'm just saying that the stuff that's going on in the world, if you're just going to let it go by, you're going to let Glenn talk about, the one world church, and you can keep your designation as a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu or whatever, but you got to believe what we're telling you to believe. If you're going to let that pass, I mean, if you can listen to that video and let that pass and not have a reaction and not actively think about it, man, we're done.
Yeah.
We're done as a society. If we're that lazy, ignorant, whatever you want to call it, if we're that, then we've got a lot that we've missed.
Yeah. Are you willing to take and adopt woke as your primary religion? You can still be a Christian if you want to be. That's fine, whatever. Wokeism has to be your number one religion, though. You got to believe it. You got to live it out. I mean, that's what it's going to come out to. I mean, transgender stuff. You know, you got these transgender boys using girls' bathrooms because that's how they claim they identify and things like that. That's part of that religion. That's part of that woke score. You have to support that.
Yeah, or you don't get your funding as a school district because you're not woke enough and your ESG score isn't working.
Right.
I mean, you got a horrible score, so we're going to judge you on that. And the goal, according to all the stuff that we read in that, which we can't get into in this, go back and watch the service. It'll be linked in the notes. But all of it comes down to, in the next 10 years or less, they want this to be fully implemented across the globe.
Yeah, it's now or never for us.
Right. Like in the next few years, if you haven't done something, in the next few months, if you haven't done something, this radical transformation reset of the world is going to have already happened, and you're going to be sitting in one of those, like Haley was, and wondering what in the world can I go off my porch to run. That's what's coming, and I'm not trying to be a doomsdayer. It's what they've said. If we're not going to take them on what they've said, then we're completely ignorant.
Right. Pastor Sean, anything to throw in before we wrap it up?
I think the thing that as we're talking, I think, I guess a subtle way this has come about. It's like one thing after another. And if you don't really pay attention to what's going on, you don't really get a grasp of it, but you can see the subtle things that has been brought out there just little by little. It's gradually going to, like Pastor Rob has said, before it's too late, it's going to be, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And they haven't done this all at once. This has been a gradual to get you, we'll take this away, or we'll do this. And it's like, and people will get comfortable with that. You know what I mean? And then before it's too long, it's like, this is where we are. How do we get here? Well, it's because it was little by little, and they just,
yeah,
which is very troubling, but that's,
It almost seems like they're setting you up to deny Christ without inherently denying Christ.
Oh man, that's deep.
If you think about it, like
that's deep.
If you follow these ideologies and just go along with them, you are inherently, you're denying Christ and what he said we should go by, which is the Bible. Yeah. And they're doing it in such a sneaky way. And, like we've said on this show, inherently not speaking up is
complicit in it.
You're speaking and not speaking. And, I think it's just something to be aware of.
Well, to end this with a little hope, because otherwise it's pretty daunting to look at everything that's happening, but to end it with a little hope, that is that this has been their 100-year plan or more, 100 and whatever year plan to do this. But God has had a plan that's been around a lot longer than 100 years. And so the hope is that if we engage in what he says and what the word says, and we do all of that, the plans of a disempowered demonic realm will be thwarted. But I just believe that the reason why we're doing these shows is just so that people understand that they have to be awake in this hour. And to be awake doesn't mean you're aware. To be awake means we're actually going to do something about it and share it.
Absolutely. So, and it all starts with sharing this message with the people around you, with people you care about. You got to start having these conversations. You got to start sharing the information. So head over to aga.network, download the app on your phone, on your smart TV, follow us on Facebook. You watch it on YouTube, Rumble, wherever we're still allowed to be.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Text AGA
be an insider. Be an insider. Text AGA to 330-619-4497. That's 330-619-4497. Text AGA to that, and you'll be one of our insiders to hear all the stuff that's happening behind the scenes.
Awesome. So thanks again for tuning in. We'll be back with more. Rob, Nate, Pastor Sean, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.